What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 16. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of our FPL squads and talk through whether it's a good move or not. If you enjoyed the video and you find it useful, please do give it a like. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please do hit that subscribe button. We're going to start off with Phil Foden. We are really only looking at game week 16 right now because we will have unlimited transfers over the World Cup. I know there was a guide that came out from FPL yesterday. I might run through that in the game week preview about how the transfers we make might count, they will count towards our total transfers made. So when you're tinkering, you might not want to actually move players in or out until you're absolutely sure who you need to remove. But ultimately, there's going to be issues from the World Cup with players that get injured or they play late into the tournament and therefore they might not be available straight away in game week 17. We're going to want to make more than one or two transfers. I'm absolutely sure of it. So I wouldn't really worry about how unlimited transfers are going to work. Just know you've got them, and we are just focusing on game week 16. So Phil Foden, over 200,000 transfers out so far this week. He has dropped in price to 8.3 million. At one point, he was up to 8.5. Okay, so that is a little bit annoying if you're an owner. The problem with Foden is it's very hard to determine whether he's going to play this weekend. I guess from what we've seen recently, playing the last two Champions League games, but none of the last three Premier League games. Obviously, he has come on, but he hasn't started them. That would indicate to me that he's not going to start in game week 16. Now, that's not guaranteed. And the other problem you have as an owner is it doesn't necessarily matter what happens in the Carabao Cup. Foden could play 90 minutes in that cup game, and I think they've got Chelsea. So, you know, Pep Guardiola might go fairly strong. And then he could also be available for game week 16 still and play in that game as well. So it's not guaranteed that if he plays 90 in the Carabao Cup that he won't start in the Premier League, but that would maybe be a good indication. Now, it is the first game again on the weekend. Man City versus Brentford is the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday, but we know what's going to happen. Everyone's going to wait for team news. If that comes out, the servers are going to go down. And if you've tried to get rid of Foden the last 2 weeks and not been successful, do you want to go through that again? So I think there is a good reason at this point to think about selling him. Now, if you've got other things to worry about, players with worse fixtures who are definitely out because they're suspended or injured or something like that, you could deal with them first and just hope that Foden plays against Brentford. But that was kind of my advice last week, and it just didn't work out at all because he came off the bench and obviously got no points. So I think we can, like, if you're an owner, you can start thinking about selling him at this point. Obviously, wait and see what happens in the Carabao Cup, what Pep Guardiola says in his press conference and all that kind of stuff. Because if Foden doesn't play, then maybe that indicates he's going to play in the league. It's not guaranteed. That's the problem with Pep, right? We see sometimes players play like 7, 8, 9 games in a row, then they might miss one. And then all of a sudden you get situations like this where Foden was playing regularly, now he's missed the last 3 league games. That tells me something else has gone on there. Because a few weeks before that, Pep was saying that, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but essentially Foden's so good, they have to play him even though he's not playing that well, right? And then all of a sudden he's just not in. So maybe it's that Pep wanted him to play better or do something that he'd asked him to do, and he hasn't done that. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But you need to wait and see what happens in the Carabao Cup. If it looks like Pep has put a kind of, I don't want to say weakened side because Man City are so strong, but if it looks like he's put their kind of second choice 11 out and Foden's part of that and he plays 90 minutes, I would say there's a very good chance he's going to miss Brentford at home as well. Again, not guaranteed, and that is the problem with Pep and Foden and Man City in general, but it would indicate that's possibly the case. And if you've got nothing else to deal with, maybe it is then time to look to move on from Foden and maybe look at getting him back in after game week 16 if he looks like an option. So many midfielders you could go for, like Saka, Trossard, Almiron, even Zaha against Nottingham Forest. Bowen is at home as well. So there's lots of players you could look at, but it probably is time to think about moving them on. And it's frustrating because underlying numbers are good, 5.2 points per match, really good. We know, or it's very likely Man City will score quite a few goals in this game. And if Foden starts, he could definitely be a part of that. But it is a risk. If you really want to wait, you wait and see if we get team news and if we do act upon it and just hope the servers don't go down. But you know the risks involved with that. So I think if you're not willing to risk that again and he plays in the Carabao Cup, especially if it's like 80, 90 minutes, I would probably consider getting rid of him if you've got nothing else to do. So when I was streaming on Sunday, there was quite a few questions about Darwin Nunez. I think people are looking at their FPL squads with like Wilson is flagged, Mitrovic is flagged, and they're looking at potential options. Those players might be fine, but it's worth, especially early on in the week, looking at which players you could bring in if you needed to. And Darwin Nunez would be quite high on my list of kind of players I would want to bring in this week. As you'll see from my team selection video tomorrow, I don't quite have enough money, which is massively frustrating. I don't think it's worth a hit. But if you do have the money and you do have a spare transfer, I like the look of Nunez. I think if you think of top 3 forward options this week, Haaland's always going to be top. Harry Kane against Leeds at home is a great option. Penalties. And I also think as much as Spurs have got some injuries right now, Kulusevski being back is massive for them. And we saw the impact he made against Liverpool when he came on. So I really like the look of Kane this week if you've got him. But for a bit of a cheaper price at 8.9 million, Nunez would be top 3 forward for me this week. We've got Carabao Cup games. I think Liverpool have got Derby, so I wouldn't really worry too much about minutes there. I think there'll be some rotation. Either way, I'd be very surprised to not see Nunez start against Southampton. Obviously, his minutes aren't necessarily assured. He's not always going to get to 80, 90 minutes, but in 70 minutes plus, he could do damage in that game. The only thing that kind of slightly concerns me, and I say this as someone that's owned Salah and Trent pretty much since game week 9. I've owned Salah for pretty much, I think, the whole season. I don't think I've, apart from, you know, the stuff that happened in game week 7 or 8, I've not really got rid of him. They do blow kind of hot and cold. They're doing well in the Champions League. They go and get 2 goals against Spurs. Yes, the second one was maybe a bit fortunate, but I think it was the week before, they only got 1 goal against Leeds and they lost 2-1. And that is a Leeds team that just conceded 3 goals to Bournemouth. So they haven't been scoring a huge amount of goals recently. 1 against Man City, 1 against West Ham. Obviously, they lost to Nottingham Forest, only 1 against Leeds, 2 against Spurs. They are a team that generates quite a few chances, but they haven't scored a huge amount of goals. So Liverpool themselves can be a bit frustrating. But on paper, at Anfield, the last game before the World Cup, Southampton, that looks like a fixture where if they're going to turn it on sooner rather than later, they could get quite a few goals. Obviously, Southampton have sacked Hasenhüttl now, so we don't know how they will line up, how they will play. Sometimes we see a bit of a new manager bounce. It wouldn't concern me too much about bringing in Liverpool players, but there is just that kind of hot and cold aspect with Liverpool where they are a team that we know can score lots of goals. They haven't done that recently. So that's one concern. The other one is Darwin Nunez himself. Now, if you watch him, I think Gary Neville said he's quite raw. I definitely agree with that. Like, he gets a lot of chances, but at times he just looks like, I don't know the best way to describe it. Sometimes his first touch is just off. And he is still very young, right? He is still in a brand new league, trying to get used to Liverpool and stuff like that. So I think you've just got to be that FPL manager that can deal with that frustration. Know that you are buying a player that in some games gets enough chances to score a hat-trick, but he could also have those same amount of chances and only come away with 1 goal. And if he gets 1 goal and 3 bonus points, 9 points is quite nice, right? If he gets that this week, you could be happy with that. But if you watch the game and you see how many other chances he gets, it could lead to a bit of frustration. So I wouldn't let that put me off buying him. I think he's just one of those players. You know there's a haul there. You know there's double digits every single game. But quite often he's just not going to get them. So I really like him as an option this week. If you've got a spare transfer for a forward, and that is your best move, like if one of them is out, like Mitrovic or Wilson, or you've got Alvarez like me, and you've got enough money in the bank, Nunez is the one I would bring in. Obviously, Haaland and Kane are better, but they're a lot more money as well. So nearly 200,000 FPL managers have sold João Cancelo this week. Now, I would assume a big percentage of that is because he got a red card in game week 15, and people are assuming that he's suspended for game week 16, but that's not the case. He got his red card for fouling a player in the box as the last man, okay? So he didn't make an attempt to play the ball. It was a penalty and a red card. He gets sent off. That's just a 1-game match ban, right? It's not 3 games because it wasn't violent conduct. And then it gets a bit confusing. And I didn't realise this till this weekend either, if I'm honest. If you get 5 yellow cards in the Premier League, you have to serve that suspension in the Premier League, right? We've seen that with Maddison already. Same's going to happen with Dalot this week as well for game week 16. But if you get a red card, you can serve it in the next competition. So he is going to serve his 1-game suspension selection in the Carabao Cup, which means he's going to be fully rested for the game at the weekend. Now, he's going to be available. Whether or not he plays is up to Pep Guardiola. I know some people have speculated that because he got himself sent off and he made the game tricky and they only just won it, that Pep might punish him. I just don't see that. I don't think anyone else can play fullback in that Man City team like him, especially with the injuries they've got. You know, John Stones isn't going to be as creative as Cancelo, neither is Ake on the other side. They can fill in those positions, but they can't do what he does. So I would be extremely surprised if he doesn't play in game week 16. It's a pretty good fixture. I wouldn't say it's easy, although I've got it down as green because it is at home, it is Man City, and obviously they are the best defence in the league. But Tony's going to be back, he's going to be fully rested. We know Brentford will go there and try and give them a game, but João Cancelo is still down as one of the best defenders for game week 16. So unless you've got 2 free transfers, or you really need to take a hit to fund another move, I don't see any reason to sell him this week. There's every chance Man City will get a clean sheet. There's every chance he plays. He's definitely not suspended for game week 16. He is available. On the other hand, Dalot is definitely suspended for game week 16. He picked up his 5th yellow card in game week 15 against Aston Villa. Now, you don't necessarily need to sell him. He's only kind of 4.8 million. He could sit third on your bench. You might have a forward or a midfielder that you need to sell instead. So it's not something you need to necessarily panic about. One thing to consider as well, and this is probably a little bit niche. I'm not sure there's many people in this situation, but if you got on Dalot earlier when he was a bit of a cheaper price, you might have money kind of tied up in him. And I think if you want a Man United defender after the break, right, in game week 17, he probably still is the best option. And they actually have some okay fixtures, right? So Nottingham Forest at home, Wolves away, Bournemouth at home. Then it's Man City and Arsenal. That's not great, but he's so cheap you could bench him in those games. Then it's Palace at home, Leeds away, Leicester at home, Brentford at home, etc. So if you still wanted a Man United defender, despite them just conceding 3 goals to Aston Villa, Dalot's probably still the best option in that back 4. He does have some good fixtures. You might not want to sell him because of selling value. It's not the end of the world if you do, but for some of you, it's going to be worth considering. Outside of that, if you're going to sell him this week, there's a few options I would look at. So Spurs have got Leeds at home. Check to see who plays in the Carabao Cup and then try and work out which fullbacks are going to play in that game. If you've got enough money to go to someone like Perisic, he could be a really nice punt in game week 16. Doherty possibly as well. My only worry is that Doherty will start the Carabao Cup game, which means Emerson Royale will start the game against Leeds. It's not guaranteed, but I think for one game week, you want to get someone that's more likely to play. You don't want to take... I think you want to try and take differential punts if you can, but you still don't want to take such a massive risk they might not play. So see what happens in the Carabao Cup. You've got West Ham defenders like Cresswell and obviously Zuma as well. I would just worry a little bit about that match because I think Leicester can always find a way to score. I think if you've got West Ham defenders, you're probably playing them this week, and I wouldn't worry about it, but I'm not sure I would bring them in now. I think if you got them last week, then they were a good option because they had 2 nice home fixtures, but now it's Leicester at home. I would maybe look to avoid that if you can. There's not necessarily a huge amount of other options. For example, I think that, you know, Dunk or Webster is probably a better option at home to Aston Villa. I know Aston Villa, new manager now with Emery, and obviously they did really well against Man United, but going away to Brighton is not easy. So I think Brighton defenders are probably better than West Ham. And obviously you've got Arsenal defenders. If you can afford to go to Gabriel, he's the best option in my opinion. Or if you need to go a little bit cheaper, you've got Ben White as well. So I think Dalot can definitely be sold if you haven't got much money tied up and you're not worried about kind of game week 17. But I would probably avoid the West Ham defence, and I would either take a punt on the Spurs one, or if we're trying to keep it in and around the same price, go for a Brighton or Arsenal defender. That's my opinion anyway. Let me know what you think about cheap defenders. Who would you go for? Let me know in the comments below. So Almiron just cannot stop scoring. Another goal in game week 15. Who's to say that he can't go and get another one in game week 16? His confidence is probably at an all-time high. He's on a crazy run of form. His expected goals per 90 minutes at 0.35 is pretty decent for someone that only costs 5.8 million. They're also up on previous seasons as well. So Eddie Howe's got him playing really well. Another load of transfers in, over 200,000 so far this week. He looks like a great option for 5.8 million, even with Chelsea at home, and I'll come on to that in a minute. I would say anyone that has already brought him, I don't think it's necessarily a mistake. Anyone that owns him is definitely not looking to get rid. But I would argue for a 1-week punt, if you've got more money to spend than that, he's probably not the player that I would go for. For 5.8 million, fair enough, right? There's probably not many better options. I think Eze is in and around that price, but I wouldn't necessarily go for him over Almiron. But if you've kind of got like 6.5 or 7 or 7.5 to spend, I'm not sure he's the one I'd go for a 1 week punt. Like, when we think about Chelsea, they're a team that are not necessarily performing that well right now, not necessarily getting the results they want, but they're not conceding a huge amount of goals, apart from that Brighton game, which is probably the one that sticks out in our mind. Like, if we have a look at recent results for Chelsea, so 1 against Arsenal, I think the expected goals, to be fair, were quite a bit higher towards Arsenal, like maybe 2.2 or something. But still, they only conceded 1. The Brighton game was a bit crazy, but yes, they did concede 4. But outside of that, 1 against United, none against Brentford, none against Villa, none against Wolves, 1 against Palace, etc. They don't concede a huge amount of goals. Now, don't get me wrong, Newcastle playing extremely well this season, right? They're creating a lot of chances, they're attacking well, but I only see like maybe 1, maybe 2 goals in this game for Newcastle. And obviously, if they do score 1 or 2, Almiron could be involved, but I don't think it's necessarily as easy as it possibly looks, because we're thinking Newcastle on top of the world right now, playing brilliantly, Chelsea playing really badly, but as we've seen, Chelsea can keep the score down. There is still a good defence in there. So I think for a 1 week punt, if I've got more money to spend, Almiron is probably not where I would spend it. After the break, when Newcastle got great fixtures and we're looking for enablers, I'm sure he's going to be in a lot of people's teams. But for a 1 week punt, he's not where I would look. So if we go to midfielders, it's all going to depend on how much money you've got. But for 7.7 million, I mean, he is the highest scoring player. 87 points for that price. That is crazy. But I think Trossard, if he keeps playing up front, Villa at home, probably a better fixture. I mean, let's see how Emery does, but I think that's a better fixture. Brighton, a good team. Most people already own Martinelli. I don't think I would go for Gross over Almiron. Zaha I would, but he's 7.5 million, so it really does depend on how much you got to spend. Bernardo Silva, maybe. Rodrigo, if he had a better fixture, but unfortunately it Spurs away. Leeds could score in that game, but I don't expect a huge amount. I still think Rashford is worth a look. Played 90 minutes again at the weekend against Villa. Let's see how many minutes he gets in the Carabao Cup. But Fulham away is a pretty good fixture. So I would rather have Rashford than Almiron. Although I guess because it's at home, you know, fans on their side, etc., it could be a decent game for Newcastle. Eze is not someone I would really look at instead of Almiron either. I think from a goal threat perspective, I would back Almiron. So there's not a huge amount of other options I would go for 7.5 or below. But the likes of Rashford, the likes of Trossard, the likes of Zaha, I think as 1 week punts, they're probably better options. But for anyone that's bought him in, definitely not a mistake. The guy's playing absolutely incredibly right now. Would you pick Almiron for 1 week only over Trossard, Zaha and Rashford for this week? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you again tomorrow.